Okay, so chapter one was called The Black Eye of the Month Club, and it just started off by introducing Arnold Spirit Jr., and he is just called Junior throughout this book, and he is the main character, narrator, and protagonist in this book. He was born with excess cerebral spinal fluid in his brain, and he had surgery to fix that when he was an infant, and the surgery was expected to be fatal, but it wasn't, and it ended up just having minor complications. And the complications included him growing 10 extra teeth, suffering from occasional seizures, being extremely skinny but having really large hands and feet and head. And he also suffers from a lisp and a stutter. And one thing that was included in this section that I didn't write on here is that he did have his 10 extra teeth pulled, but the dentist that he goes to only performs like big surgeries like once a year, so he had to get all of his 10 teeth pulled at the same time. And the dentist, who is white, believed that Native Americans or Indians feel like half as much pain as anyone else does, so he didn't give him as much like numbing as maybe he probably should have. So I thought that was horrible. So because of all of his complications from his brain damage, other kids on the reservation, or res as Junior calls it, think that he's weird and calls him really unkind names. And they beat him up too, and that's why this chapter is called The Black Eye of the Month Club, because he basically gets a black eye every month because of just the way he is. It also mentioned that he finds comfort in drawing, and he loves to draw cartoons of both himself and his family and food. And he hopes that someday those drawings will make him famous and he'll be able to be rich and move away from the reservation. So chapter 2 was called Why Chicken Means So Much to Me. And this chapter just really went into detail about how his family is very poor. And so one of the consequences of being poor is that the food is pretty minimal. But Junior not makes most of it, but kind of, he says that hunger isn't the worst thing about being poor because hunger makes food taste better. So he kind of has like a positive outlook on it that way. But he does describe the worst part of being poor by explaining a story that he used to have a dog named Oscar. And he was like super close with Oscar, closer than he was to any person, including family members. But when Oscar got old and sick, his family didn't have enough money to take Oscar to the vet like they should have. And so Junior's dad takes Oscar out back and shoots him to put him out of his misery. And so Junior describes that as being the worst part about being poor, is just not having, the money to do things that you should be able to, or that you wish you could be able to, like taking your dog to the vet, for instance. So chapter 3 is called Revenge is My Middle Name. And in this chapter, Rowdy is introduced, and he is Junior's best friend. And Rowdy is described as being born mad, and so he's a very mad individual, just in general, pretty violent. And his parents are both alcoholics, and his dad is a mad drunk. So he beats Rowdy when he is drunk, which is most of the time. So Rowdy has a pretty hard home life, which describes why he is also so mad all the time. And in this chapter, Junior and Rowdy decide to go to the local powwow. And there Junior runs into the Andrus triplets, and these triplets are 30-year-old brothers who are very mean and violent to Junior for the reasons that I said earlier, just because of all of the complications of his brain damage. They just look at him as being different and weird, and so they basically pick on him for this reason. Um, and at the powwow, they do get into a little bit of a fight. And so because of this, Rowdy waits until they all are like passed out for being drunk, and he gets revenge on them by shaving off their eyebrows and cutting off their braids. And he tells everyone else that it was a different tribe that did that, and so he never got caught for it. And at the end of the chapter, after all that goes down, Junior actually reassures the reader that Rowdy is his best friend and he's almost like family, and that he is not all violent and all mad, that he loves cartoons, he loves the things that Junior loves, and to just give him a chance.
Hello, my name is Mary Morales. The next chapter is Go Means Go. In this chapter, Junior follows Mr. P's advice about leaving the reservation. He discusses this with his parents, trying to find the place that has the most hope. And after some prodding, his parents say that white people have the most hope, as in the quote that I have added to this slide. Because of this admission, Junior decides that he wants to go to a different school. His parents list a couple of schools that have supplemental descriptions in the book of having poor white people attending them, but Junior states that he wants to go to the school in Rearden, which is where the rich white people are. The school is quite far away from the reservation, being about 22 miles away, um, and Junior describes it as a hick town and recalls an incident where his dad was pulled over just for being Indian. But Junior recognizes that this school is his best option due to the better technology and funding that the school has, from nice basketball courts and a chemistry lab in it as well. So he's able to see that the advantages provided there will help him to meet the potential that Mr. P saw in him and wants him to go uh, and live up to. His parents tell him that it'll be difficult for him to go to school there because of the distance and probably also because of the way he will be treated there. But Junior is aware of that and that the other people on the reservation are going to be mad at him for leaving like that. This next chapter is titled Rowdy Sings the Blues. In this chapter, Junior tells his best friend Rowdy that he has decided to go to school in Rearden. Rowdy is skeptical and doubts that Junior will leave, but he sees that Junior is actually being serious about this decision and begins to become quite upset. There is some more explanation in this chapter of what sort of place Rearden is, as well as how Junior sees it. Um, there's a few examples of how Junior school is always lost against Rearden School in any sort of match, from basketball to an academic contest where they lost 50 points to 1. This chapter also shows what Junior's mindset is, or how he views the students at Rearden. So he describes them as being magnificent, knowing everything, and being filled with hope, as in the quote, "They were beautiful and smart and epic. They were filled with hope," which is on page 50. After this explanation, Junior tries to convince Rowdy to join him in going to Rearden because he wants to go there with his best friend, and Junior is one of the people who sees the potential in Rowdy, the academic potential in him. Rowdy gets mad and starts shouting at Junior, and this eventually escalates to him beating Junior up. The text also shows how both Rowdy and Junior are very upset about this situation because they both see that their friendship will never quite be the same again. So this next chapter is titled How to Fight Monsters and is mostly about Junior's first day of school. When his dad drops him off, he's scared about starting school here, but he knows that he can't go back to the reservation. He states that going back to the reservation would make his situation even worse, and that he would be pummeled, mutilated, and crucified. His father gives him some lunch money, even though Junior qualifies for the free lunch at the school. Um, he gets the lunch money because he doesn't want to be singled out even further by being the only the only Indian student, and needing the free lunch, seeing it as being a charity type of thing. Because he has shown up early, the school building is still locked, and Junior has to wait outside with the other students who show up later. We get some more insight of his thoughts on the other students, as well as what he thinks that they're thinking of him, because they're all staring at him, and he has a black eye still from his experience with Rowdy. When he goes to class, he meets Penelope, and the other students laugh when he tells them that his name is Junior. The teacher uses his first name, Arnold, and this makes a big misunderstanding with the other students who were laughing at his name being Junior. And the embarrassment from this misunderstanding leads to him not speaking to anyone for about a week. During this time, Junior is being verbally bullied, primarily by a student named Roger, who's like a very large student, I guess. They describe him as a giant. But Roger and his friends are calling Junior racist names, but one day when he tells a joke that goes too far, Junior punches him square in the face. So even though Junior is ready for a fight based on all of his previous experiences on the reservation, he is surprised when neither Roger or his friends retaliate, and he is also very confused about this.
Hi everyone, my name is Maddie Nygaard, and the next chapter we are going to be talking about is Grandmother Gives Me Advice. Junior just punched Roger in the face for being racist, and he expected Roger to hit him back, but he didn't. So when he got home from school, he wanted to seek advice from his parents about what to do. But neither of his parents were home, so he asked his grandmother. She was pretty shocked that Roger didn't hit him back, but she knew exactly why. She explains that he respects Junior. She says to him that you punched the alpha dog in the face, they're going to respect you now. This was on page 70 when she says this. The next day, Junior discovers that his grandmother was exactly right. He gets a ride to school from his dad's best friend, Eugene, on his cool vintage motorcycle. And Junior and Roger have a small conversation about the motorcycle. Junior was expecting Roger to beat him up, but he never did. Of course, with his new confidence, Junior becomes a little cocky and tries talking to Penelope, but she just sniffs at him and acts like she doesn't even know him. It looks like he still needs to figure out girls. In the next chapter, Tears of a Clown, Junior tells us a little story about when he told Rowdy that he was in love with an Indian girl named Dawn. And this was when he was 12 years old. Of course, the way that Rowdy is, he makes fun of Junior and calls him stupid for getting emotional and crying. Eventually, Junior stops crying, and he tells Rowdy not to tell anyone that he cried over Dawn. Junior then tells us, and he didn't tell anybody. Rowdy was my secret keeper. That's a quote on page 76. Now, the next chapter is titled Halloween, and it's about Halloween, obviously. And Junior goes to school dressed up like a homeless man, excuse me, because it was easy for him. Since he's poor, he was able to have some raggedy clothes and have more of that homeless dress because he is poor and he doesn't have fancy clothes. So it was easy for him to dress up as a homeless person. When he gets to school, he finds out that Penelope is also dressed as a homeless person, and he comments on it, but she says that she's wearing her costume as a statement and that she wants to raise money while trick-or-treating, and instead of asking for candy. Junior decided to do this as well to kind of like bond with Penelope. Therefore, that night he went around asking for money on the reservation so that he and Penelope could donate their money the next day together. He was actually able to collect a small sum of money, and he was really excited to show Penelope the next day. Unfortunately, Junior gets mugged, beaten up, and gets money stolen. The next day at school, Penelope shows sympathy towards Junior and says that she will put his name on the money that she's going to donate still. With this, Junior starts to believe that he and Penelope can start to become closer. And of course, at this point, he wishes he had his best friend Rowdy to ask for advice about girls. Lastly, I'm going to be talking about the chapter Slouching Before Thanksgiving. It's kind of funny how it's titled Slouching Before Thanksgiving because when we start reading the chapter, it actually feels like a big slouch. And by this I mean it's because Junior explains to us that he feels very lonely at Rearden because he doesn't really talk to anybody, he doesn't have too many friends yet, and he kind of just like plays by himself in PE. Although he does believe that he is the smartest out of everyone else at the school. And one day in science class, Junior actually corrects the teacher, Mr. Dodge, about how petrified wood isn't actually wood. Mr. Dodge becomes furious, and the class genius, Gordy, actually jumps in only to state that Junior was correct. Of course, Junior thinks that Gordy could possibly become a new friend because in this, when Gordy stands up for Junior, he sees it as like an act of heroism, like, oh my gosh, Gordy's super cool, we could become best friends. So then after that incident, Junior goes in to explain about how he gets to and from school. He says it's never very consistent because sometimes his parents won't have gas for the car, or they're too drunk, or the car doesn't work. Therefore, sometimes he hitchhikes, and he has had to walk a couple times the entire 22 miles home after school. One day he comes home from school and he finds his mother crying, and she explains that his sister, Mary, has run away with a gambler she met at a casino. This makes his parents very upset, but Junior kind of sees it as his sister being a warrior. Therefore, he decides to go to school the next day and try to become friends with Gordy. He succeeds, and they end up studying together, and Gordy teaches Junior how to read. Junior also explains to Gordy why he draws comics. He says, I use them to understand the world, to make fun of the world. Sometimes I draw people because they're my friends and family, and I want to honor them. This was on page 95. I think that this is a great way to understand more of the reason why there are some of his comics in the actual novel. It adds to the story, and it just kind of gives it, like, us more of an idea of who Junior is and why he draws these comics. And of course it gives us a visual of what is going on in his life, and it kind of adds kind of a little bit of comedy, if you want to think, into the novel, because his comics are pretty funny. Next, Gordy actually teaches Junior the importance of books. Gordy really loves books. He has counted every single book in the library, and Junior actually states to Gordy that no matter how much you learn, you just keep on learning because there is so much more you need to learn. This was on page 97. I like it when Junior says this because it is very true. We're always learning, and after we think we've learned everything, there is just so much more to learn.
chapter called My Sister Sends Me an Email. This chapter was about Junior's sister sending him an email about how happy she is in Montana. She moved there with her new husband and they live on the Flathead Reservation. She said that they got to stay in a hotel for their honeymoon on Flathead Lake and they ordered fry bread from room service and they said that it was almost as good as their grandma's. She also said that there is a lot of white people on the reservation, which she said was very different from their old reservation. This chapter was called Thanksgiving. It was about Junior's family having Thanksgiving, and while they were eating all their food and having a big feast, Junior asked his dad why they celebrate Thanksgiving because the Pilgrims and Indians were friends during the first one, but after that they tried to kill them. And Junior's dad says we should give thanks that they didn't kill all of us. Junior was a little bit confused about this because he still didn't understand what the point was. Then later on in the chapter, Junior missed Rowdy and decided that he was going to go and visit him. So he went to Rowdy's house and his dad answered the door and was very drunk. And he said that Rowdy wasn't home. And so Junior gave him a cartoon that he drew to give to Rowdy. And his dad basically told Junior that he was gay. And this really upset Junior, so he said, just please give him the cartoon, and started walking away. And when he was walking away, he saw Rowdy in the window looking at his cartoon, and Rowdy flipped him off. But he didn't crumple up the cartoon or throw it away or anything, so Junior felt like Rowdy still sort of missed him. This chapter was called Hunger Pains. And it was about Junior and Penelope. At the beginning of the chapter, Junior was in class and he was really bored, so he decided to go to the bathroom. And while he was in the bathroom, he heard somebody in the girls' bathroom who sounded like they were puking. So he went to the girls' bathroom, knocked on the door, and asked if they were okay. They screamed at him to get away, or to go away and leave them alone. And he decided to stay there because he didn't want to just leave them there if they weren't okay. So finally the person came out and it ended up being Penelope. And after asking her what was wrong, he was like, are you anorexic or something? And she's like, no, I'm bulimic. He's asked her also what the difference was, and she said anorexic people are only are anorexic all the time, and bulimic people are only bulimic when they're puking, which kind of confused Junior because it didn't really make a whole lot of sense. So later on in the chapter, they became closer, and Penelope told him that she wanted to study architecture at Stanford, and they both realized that they wanted to travel the world, and they had big dreams. And then at the end of the chapter, they kind of started dating. Junior didn't really know if they were dating or not because it didn't seem like they were dating, but everyone, including Penelope's dad, said that they were. And Penelope's dad was not happy about it because he was racist and threatened Junior. So that's kind of how the chapter ended. This was the last chapter called Rowdy Gives Me Advice About Love. This chapter started off with Junior watching Penelope play volleyball, and everything she did made him realize how much he really liked her. So he went to the computer lab and wanted to email Rowdy because he was still considered his best friend and thought maybe he would be able to help him out. So he emailed him and said something along the lines of, I'm in love with this girl, what do I do? And Rowdy's response was, I'm sick of Indian guys who treat white women like bowling trophies, get a life. So after this email, Junior kind of realized that Rowdy didn't want to talk to him and wasn't going to be any help. So he asked his other friend at the school, Gordy, and he said kind of the same thing, and Gordy was like, well, let me do some research. So he looked up some articles, and it was talking about how white women are privileged and they're the only people who ever get any attention. And so Gordy told him, you're basically just a racist asshole like everybody else. And that is kind of how the chapter ended.